Hello, and welcome to week number 7 of Intro to Theater Online. I am, as always, your professor, Andrew Friedman. I hope that you're all doing well and enjoying the class so far. And because this is the start of week number 7, that means week number 8 marks the middle of our semester, meaning it is time to start thinking about your midterm. Okay? Your midterm will be available to you from October the 12th at 8 a.m. until October the 15th at midnight. Now, to be able to take your midterm exam, you need to register with B Virtual Proctoring. You can see the link for that on the left-hand side of your screen. You need to click that link and follow the instructions to register with B Virtual Proctoring. You will be asked to designate a time that you would like to take the exam. And they will assign a proctor to you to be able to watch you take that exam. Again, those times are from October the 12th at 8 a.m. until October the 15th at midnight. After midnight on October the 15th, meaning as soon as it becomes October the 16th, you will no longer be able to take the midterm exam, and you will receive a 0 if you did not complete it by that time. So please register with B Virtual Proctoring today, now, after you finish watching this video, and get yourself set up so you're prepared. The midterm exam will include all of the information in the first 8 weeks of the semester. So I encourage you to revisit your notes and your quizzes from that time period to prepare for that exam. So in this week, we are turning the page and we're starting to think about the business side of theater. So you will be reading chapter 4, Where Can Theater Be Performed, and parts of chapter 3, the section on the business of theater. In addition to that, you will complete quiz number 4 and the business theater simulation project. An important thing to keep in mind about that project is that you need to spend all of your money at the end of each phase to be able to continue on. So the instructions are there and you can click on that link. In addition, I encourage you to start work on your live play critique, which is due at the end of week number 8. I opened up the learning module for week number 8 so you can click ahead, see what the instructions are there. If you've seen your play already, you can get started on that. If you have not, you can start to look at those instructions and plan your time accordingly. There'll be quite a bit of work in week number 8 because it is the midterm. Okay. Now it's time to think about the business of theater. This, to my mind, is really a question of money, right? And I would encourage us to think about money and theater in 3 ways. The first way is to ask, where is money spent in the theater and on what? The second one is, where does that money come from? And the third question is, how does the theater expect to get that money back? Now, the first question, where is money spent in the theater, is a little bit deceptive. Because, in fact, with most entertainment, like theater, we don't really see where the majority of the money is spent. Where we see money is on the ticket price that we pay to get into the theater. But, in fact, many of the places where money is spent are completely hidden from us in the theater process. So, for example, we might think that we go to see a production that costs, say, $75, and we think, well, why did this show cost $75? Well, some of the places that we start to, if we think about it, we can see where money is spent, are on issues like costumes. Perhaps the costumes could be rented. Perhaps the costumes need to be made. Well, then you need a costume designer who needs to be paid, and you need to pay for the costumes, which also may need to be fitted or laundered or tailored, right? And this is also true of other elements of the theater. Perhaps the performers need to have microphones, and those microphones need a sound technician to run them. And that sound technician needs a soundboard to be able to run that technology on. So, as you're reading this chapter and thinking back over the semester, I would like you to start to think more broadly about where money is spent, right? The money to rent the theater, the money to rent or create wigs for the performers. And in fact, this hasn't even yet addressed one of the largest expenses of the theater, which is the performer themselves, right? So whether you are seeing a show that has Denzel Washington in it, or an amateur, or I shouldn't say an amateur, but an unknown performer, that person needs to be paid for their time and their performance. But not only that, but that performer needs to also be paid for the entire rehearsal process leading up to the performance. So while Denzel Washington may only be on Broadway for 6 weeks or 8 weeks, he may have already spent 4 to 6 to 8 weeks rehearsing and creating the show that you're now seeing. All of that costs a tremendous amount of money. And we can also extend this and think about the play itself. Now, some plays that are 100 years old or older fall into the public domain. That means we don't need to necessarily pay licensing to do them. You don't have to pay Shakespeare to put on one of his plays. But if you are talking about a contemporary playwright, or someone like Lin-Manuel Miranda, who wrote Hamilton, you need to pay the creator of that art form royalties for that performance. So that also gets factored into this question of how do we pay for the theater? The next question that we come up with here is, where does this money come from? And this begins to highlight different types of theater, those being for-profit and non-profit theaters. So if we want to think about something that's going to be on Broadway, like Hamilton or The Book of Mormon or The Lion King, all of these are for-profit ventures. In fact, everything that's on Broadway is for profit, meaning that you get producers and investors to pony up money, give money up front, with the hope that their show will be a success and they'll be able to not only recoup their investment, but make money, right? It's a for-profit venture. Now, when we get to things like off-Broadway and off-Broadway, and also amateur theater, these are by and large non-profit ventures, meaning that they depend on grants and funding organizations, both on the federal level and on the state and local level, to subsidize their productions. That means they don't anticipate that the sale of tickets will earn enough money for them to A, make a profit, or B, even pay all of the bills, right? It is subsidized by the federal, state, and local contributors to that theater. Something else that oftentimes contributes to it are individual sponsors or donors, right? So these theaters might approach a very wealthy person who loves the theater or other arts and ask them to contribute money to the theater to help it thrive and succeed. And in response to that, that donor oftentimes, well, they always get a tax deduction for that, but then they also might get other nice perks from the theater as a thank you for their contributions. So we need to think about where the money is coming from, right? And the other question that we've started to answer here is, how does that money get made back, right? Now we know that Hamilton expects to make its money back by running for 20 years on Broadway, right? And then licensing that play around the country for other people to perform and make royalties off of that. But also in the case of musicals, they can oftentimes recoup money or make money by the sale of merchandise. Maybe that's t-shirts, but oftentimes that's in the form of CD sales. Plays sometimes make money by the selling of scripts. And another way in which money is made is oftentimes by the licensing the rights for other people to perform that material. Now, this also starts to highlight one of the very tricky aspects of theater in general, right? Which is, it is an incredibly local art form. What do I mean by that? Okay, so Hamilton, which is the most successful musical of perhaps the last 10 years, is running in New York City at one theater for a maximum of 8 performances a week. What that means is right now, if you want to see the hottest musical in the world, there are only 8 chances every week for everybody in the world to go and see that performance. Now, let's compare that to, say, whatever the hottest, biggest blockbuster movie is. For some reason, I'm thinking of the new Planet of the Apes movie that came out this summer. Not the hottest movie in the world, but it'll suffice as an example, right? So when the new Planet of the Apes movie opens, it doesn't just open at one theater in Indianapolis. When it opens in New York and Chicago and Indianapolis and Cleveland and LA and every major minor city in the United States, and oftentimes in many small towns. Not only that, it usually opens worldwide. So Planet of the Apes is being shown in South Korea, is being shown in Germany, is being shown in Mexico and Canada and France. And not only that, but in each of these cities, there are multiple screenings every single day of that same movie, right? So while Hamilton only has 8 performances all week in one theater, Planet of the Apes had more than 8 screenings in just the one theater in Indianapolis in one day, right? And one of the things that this does is that if you have a successful product like Hamilton or Book of Mormon or Cats some time ago, it creates a great demand on a limited commodity. And the for-profit theaters are therefore able to increase the price of those tickets. And this is why on secondary markets like StubHub, you may see tickets for Hamilton going for $1,000, $2,000, right? Because only so many people get to see that in any given day. And this is one of the things that makes it such a sensation when something on Broadway is a big hit, but also the cause for so many things on Broadway to never make any money, right? Because the means of them making money are quite limited to other art forms, right? We can think about film and television and music and how these things circulate in so many different ways. The theater does not. But it's also important to point out that that limitation, that theater is very localized, is also what presumably makes it so special, right? If you were to go and see Hamilton tonight, it is the only room in the world on the planet Earth that thing is happening at that moment, right? It is a very special and rarefied experience. And this is part of the thing that makes it so costly when it's successful, and also what makes it so prone to losing money. Okay, so for this week, please read chapters 4 and 3, finish quiz number 4, The Business of Theater Simulation. Begin to think about the live play critique for next week. At least look at the instructions for that so you can get your brain going. And of equal, or maybe even greater importance, is please register for the B virtual proctoring, right? That's what you need to do to be able to complete your midterm exam. If you have any questions or problems with that, please don't hesitate to contact me. Otherwise, have a great week, and I'll see you next week.